The Dare Show podcast. Welcome back. So I'm here for another episode. This is a little special episode. Let's talk about Janet, the Jackson, the um documentary on Lifetime. I think A&E or something like that. I don't know. So overall, my thought is that it was a little bit underwhelming. There was about 90% footage we don't really care about. 10% footage that was good. I don't know. It was just very underwhelming, but let me get into it. What it really should have been called is Janet Jackson is getting old because oh my gosh. Homegirl was just crying at the drop of a hat. She was crying at this. She was crying at that. She was crying at the mural. It was just like, oh my goodness. I don't really mean she was crying at the door, but I was just being exaggerating. But she was crying about they're driving through Gary, Indiana, and she like broke down looking at this mural saying how sweet and how beautiful. And it's like, you ain't been to Gary since when? She said since she was like 8 or 9 or something. And I'm like, okay, I guess. But this really should have been called Janet and her men, because the men were the supporting role to this. It was basically Janet and how she interacts or has but affected or interacted with the men. Her husbands, starting off with her dad, her husband, her dad, her brothers, Michael, James DeBarge, or whatever DeBarge she married, Jimmy and Terry. Then we go to Renee. We go to what's his name, Jermaine. And then we don't even talk about Wassam, I think his name is. And then we have Issa. So it's just all these, and it's very interesting. She didn't have a girl. I wonder if that was sort of planned. But anyways, I don't think she's actually divorced. I think she's still going through a divorce from her ex-husband. But anyways, let's talk about some key elements, some key things that I found interesting enough to talk about. Janet was too young to remember her poverty life. I didn't realize Janet was the last Jackson. She's the baby of the, I think, people say that, but when, there's 9 of y'all, everybody's a baby at some point. But Janet's actually the baby. Yeah. She was too young to remember life in Gary, Indiana, a 2-bedroom house, 9 kids, 2 adults. Like, what the hell? To actually think they were that poor and to succumb using talent and actually blast off and become these millionaires and these famous people is very incredible. And that's all thanks to her father, Joseph Jackson, who took over and took about where we're going to go with this. Janet was introduced to the world as Janet Jackson, which is interesting because, or their little sister. Wait. So they moved to LA and they went from poverty to racism because she's like, we moved to LA and there was, although, we hear stories about Kathy Hilton and all these other, all of these other people who kind of groomed them or like welcomed them, who they live by, these other famous people that they live by. Although we hear about them, there's also, I guess, that point that I don't always hear about from them, which is the racism, go back to where you came from, and, being the first black family in a certain neighborhood Very interesting. So from poverty to racism, yippee. So I said that they introduced her as our little sister, Janet Jackson, the last born Jackson, which is funny because I only know her as Janet Jackson. I think the world and a certain generation knows her as, Michael's little sister, the Jackson's little sister. But I know her as Janet Jackson. I don't really know her as the little girl, in these earlier TV shows that she did, or just, being in Vegas doing shows, these variety shows with her brothers. I don't know that part. So it was a little bit, well, I'm not familiar with that part. I'm not going to say I don't know that part. I see pictures and videos all the time of it. But she was forced into doing those Vegas shows. And I see it as, I took it as Joseph making Vegas and Janet, well, the latter siblings, giving them a step, keeping them relevant, and keeping money in the bank. That's how I see it as keeping them relevant, mostly keeping this quote unquote legacy going. I think Reeve's 71, so and Janet is 55. So I can't believe Reeve is 71. I thought it said Reeve was born in 1950. I'm like, wow, time is just floating along. She's in her early 70s. She might not be 71. But anyways, so Janet was forced into doing these shows. She was never asked, like she said. And all these things, you kind of see her. She's like, I don't fit in. I wasn't sure where I fit in. I was the baby, so I was the last to see things. I didn't know Randy was her manager now. I was shocked because I always see there's like some videos I've heard like yelling at Randy in the background of like recently. I didn't know he was her manager. I guess he's been her manager since this new Unbreakable era, which is very interesting. I was shocked. I was like, oh, okay. Her brother Randy. Um, so we get into the marriage. Well, these TV shows that she didn't want to do. She didn't want to get into acting. She didn't want to get into singing at all. And you kind of can see this time she's kind of like really letting that emotion come out of her. Like, no, I don't want to sing. Like, I'm telling her father, like, I don't want to sing. I want to go to college. I don't want to. And it was like, you're going to sing. So she's like doing all this stuff she doesn't want to do. And she told us, she said, this is her word. She's like, I didn't want to do all these things and I need to get away from my father. So what do? I get married. And I think that was a thing back then, in a way to separate yourself from your family and separate yourself from like your father, whether good or bad, like Shaka Khan. I think Shaka Khan says she got married in order to like be in, I think, Rufus or whatever early group she was in. Janet saying, I wanted to get married, or I had to get, in order to get away from my father, I got married. Not that it was a good thing, not that it was a bad thing. Or not that it was a good thing, in a way. So she got married, and I know some people are kind of like questioning this. She didn't know that Mr. DeBarge was on drugs or pain pills, whatever. I didn't get the impression, well, I didn't really get the impression that it was a violent relationship, but I did get the impression, she's like, there was some violence in it. Because some people some fans have definitely speculated that What About from the Velvet Rope album was based upon, wait, maybe it was. It's a story. It could be autobiographical. It probably is autobiographical, but it's definitely a story and about abuse. And a lot of the, fans have said, "Oh, this is from DeBarge, the DeBarge era, the DeBarge year." Because it seemed like nothing really happened until they got married, like any kind of like violence or anything. But she didn't, like I said, she didn't allude to any violence. He was addicted to pills. They got married. She kind of realized at that point that he was addicted to whatever substance he was addicted to. But it's like they went to Michigan, got married. The night of their wedding, he left her for like 4 hours and wherever they were. Uh, and I'm just like, you didn't pick up on this until you got married? So that's the second man that's a mess in her life. She said the reason why, yeah, I read the marriage was a sham because she said she wanted to get distance from her father. Um, the second, they end up getting a divorce. I mean, an annulment. Moving along, Michael. She talks about the story. She said her, Michael, and I think Randy were thick as thieves back in the day. And then her and Michael really were close. And she's like, we would always talk. I remember her, her telling her stories about like them going to Studio 51. Um, I think like Thriller, when Thriller came out, they played. She did backup on Thriller. She was in there, or maybe not Thriller. I don't remember. Not Thriller, the song, the album PYT. I think was on Thriller. I don't know. But she tells this bizarre story. She's like, we would always talk, but this one time during Thriller, she noticed the change. And I think the change in like stardom and being a recluse and, this change happening. And she was like, he came into my room. He didn't say anything. We just like sat there, nonverbal. And then he left. And I'm like, okay, Janet, what's the point of this conversation? What was the point of that story? I'm sorry. A weird story, but anyways. So the DeBarge baby. She never said no. Her and Reby, the rumors, she had the baby and gave the baby to Reby to raise. Her and Reby never said no. They skated all around except for saying, no, there is not a baby, which is like the weirdest thing. If it's not a baby, say it's not a baby, right? The weirdest thing. Reby was looking down. All before Reby was all up at the camera phase, looking up, being, showing emotion. Then Reby's like, this silly story, looking down, and Janet's crying, talking about, I never would keep a baby. How can I keep a baby away from its father? So either she didn't have the baby. I mean, she either, had an abortion or something actually happened. Because why? Why would you not just say there was no baby? Even Debbie Allen, who was doing Fame at the time with Janet, the TV show Janet didn't want to do. Debbie was like, what baby? There is no baby. We didn't see a baby. It was just a rumor. Okay, Debbie. Okay. That was one of the weirdest parts, actually. So move on to Control. Control. I'm gonna I'm gonna listen to Control very much differently this time. She's doing a lot of songs that she didn't want to do, so she finally took control, fired her father, moved to, I don't want to move to, but started working with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, another male figure in her life. And what I see as control, knowing Janet was the baby of the family, this Jackson little sibling, the last born Jackson of Catherine. We're moving into like the sad teenage years of kind of sad body image, maybe even some food situation. This young woman, this little girl, this teenage woman being through all this, oh, I forgot to tell you, she was like, I would go around looking for a DeBarge early in the morning, driving around. I would be waiting for him. He wouldn't pick me up. He would just like, I'm trying to figure out the words, not taking advantage of. He just wouldn't show up because he had this other situation going on. So we have that going into play, the probably trauma that is being in this spotlight, trying to figure out how you belong, being forced to do all these things that you don't want to do, marrying this drug addict, annulling this drug addict, the stress of, Janet didn't even want to do these for those first two albums. So she was like, difficult. Am I mad that it flopped? I didn't even want to do them. So we're moving into Control, and she's like, I see Janet as Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, makeup artist, the best fashion. What's her name? Jimmy Jam. Paula Abdul. All these people help cultivate Janet into a young woman that she needed to be. Paula on choreography, Jimmy Jam on music. All these different people choreographed and help her become this young woman. And you actually see it. You can see it through Paula's talking, through Jimmy Jam saying, write about what you feel, write about how you are, write about what you want to write about, be yourself. And it's like these cultivations, and it's actually a very beautiful moment when you realize Control is what it is. And then it became her most successful album at that time. So far. It was beautiful. It's very beautiful. One weird thing I found, very weird, was that A&E or Lifetime, they kept referring to the men in her life as boyfriends. Like DeBarge, they had this DeBarge interview, this Renee interview, and they kept like labeling them as her boyfriends, but they're her ex-husbands. Because they were so secret, everything was so secret. They're actually her ex-husbands now. I don't know, I just found that weird. Okay, so we're moving along to Rhythm Nation, her trying to follow up on the album Control, which sold 6 million. There's a lot of pressure. I guess it was a lot of pressure to, and it's funny, they didn't say Jimmy, he was like, he didn't say it was pressure to like a sophomore Jinx or a sophomore album, because this is, her fourth album at the end of the day, especially, she didn't even like move labels. One funny thing that I did find funny, she said when she had recorded the song at the family house when she was a kid, teenager or whatever, and she accidentally left it in the studio, or didn't erase it, or didn't hide it, or whatever. She came home the next day to her father and a couple brothers listening to it, and he told her she was going to sing. She said, these are her words, she's like, he said, I was going to sing. I had a meeting with A&M the next day, or not soon after, and was signed. I was like, damn, it was that fast? Like, wow. I wonder why he didn't get her signed to, because I've never heard of A&M. And I forget, she wasn't signed to like Sony or Columbia or Warner Brothers, like those bigger known, that come to mind known uh, labels back then in the 80s. She was on to A&M. I don't know. I'll look into A&M in a few minutes. But I was like, A&M, because I do forget, she was with A&M, and then she moved over to Virgin, and then Def Jam, I believe. I think. Yeah. Okay, but anyways. So, Rhythm Nation was not supposed to be a Rhythm Nation social conscious. And I think this is the part where one thing I do admire about Janet's career was it's literally an evolution of a woman, and how we go from taking control to trying to, Rhythm Nation is sort of a good blueprint of a diverse album. There's there's is it the word social justice in a way songs on it. There's love songs, there's fun songs, there's sexier songs. Like, that album is low-key like a blueprint of how to make a really good album in a way. They to make a social just I'm forgetting like how they worded it. To make a social conscious, I guess, album back then was risky, and they were like, we weren't going to tell the label. It was not the plan. It just happened. And what a wonderful album Rhythm Nation is. What a wonderful album that is. So then she ends up meeting Renee, who is a film person, a photographer, film person. He does a lot of her work, her videos. One thing I noticed about Renee and Janet is it seemed like Janet, they never fought like in public, I guess, or fought on camera. Because certain moments he has this takeover spirit, and it's very like, is this your is this your career or Janet's career? Like, what's going on here? Um, we got Tina Landon. She talked. She was like, he talked, and he was like, I'm like an extension of Janet. Tina didn't necessarily. I meant to watch part 3 over, but Tina didn't necessarily bash Renee or like said negative things about. It was like slightly negative things about him. It was interesting, but she definitely was like, it was a weird yet working relationship. But anyways, so we go on to Poetic Justice, and I'm not like a huge movie fan, nor a Poetic Justice fan. So she plays Justice, and I didn't realize Q-Tip was in the movie. And for like 5 minutes, we listened to Tupac and Q-Tip talk about how they loved kissing Janet, and it was just like, okay, why are we? Can we get on to more important information? So I definitely believe that, we all know they fucked because he worked with her on the Velvet Rope album, and she has like these like sexual innuendos, sexual vocals, like they're flirting in a way, and it's like, okay, they fucked. But they're the best of friends. We go on to Scream. I didn't realize Scream was as early in her career as it was. I thought it was like late, like 1996 or something, but it was in 1994. So Scream comes about, and it was so cute seeing her and Janet, her and Michael at the piano. I mean, not the piano, writing down lyrics like in New York at their house, writing down lyrics, trying to come up with this song, like literally coming up with this song. It's like, wow. I believe Scream went to number 5. They said Rhythm Nation went to number 2, but the album went to number 1. And no, they said Rhythm Nation went to number 1, but I'm like, the album went to number 1, but the song went to number 2. So I don't know what they were reading because I've read it a lot. um, she talked about how Scream, making the video Scream, they kind of blocked both Janet and Michael off from each other, from not seeing each other, low key making this competition. It's supposed to be a couple days of shooting. It ended up being like more than a couple days. I think it was supposed to be. It was ended up being $7 million or $6 million to make. It was not supposed to be this expensive. It's not supposed to be this long. Very interesting. That's all I have to say. But she was like, they kind of like, I wonder if Scream left a bad taste in her mouth because she didn't perform that until after he passed away. And Michael performed Scream quite frequently afterwards. But I'm like, I wonder if it left a bad taste in her mouth, making the video, the song. It's funny because the song is very angry, but yet in the video, she's like, they kind of pent us up against each other. So it's kind of like, yikes. Constant abusive relationships. I don't know why I wrote that down, but constant abusive relationships. Okay, I'm guessing I wrote that down because she was in constant abusive. I don't know. Oh, what? Okay, so we're ending out Renee. Renee, we found out, Renee and her were married. I feel like Janet didn't talk a whole lot. Um, I feel like there was a lot of stuff we probably could have gotten into. I feel like there was a lot of dead space, a lot of unnecessary talk from other people. She said Renee was she ended up being addicted to some kind of pain pills. And as we know, the Velvet Rope was like this healing moment, this reflective moment of Janet and her depression and all these other, as we know, depression, being in these bad relationships and trying to figure out who you are in the world and in your family, dealing with Michael and his first allegations and the effects of that. And, she said she was supposed to do this big campaign with Coca-Cola, but then Michael's first allegations dropped like a couple days later and they said, no, thank you. So the Velvet Rope was supposed to be this healing moment. And towards the end of towards the beginning of the Velvet Rope, here we have, she finds out Renee is addicted to pain pills. So that's the ending of that relationship while she's trying to heal herself. It's like, oh, give Janet and Demita Joe a break. The Super Bowl. Like, I don't really care about the Super Bowl because I did find out that she kind of made fun of it. She made fun of it. Janet has never. I meant to go look at that Oprah interview, but I'm gonna say this because I don't think anything really has been answered. Nothing's been answered. Was it supposed to happen? Was it not supposed to happen? What went wrong? I think we know what went wrong, but like, was it supposed to happen? That New York Times documentary, which had her stylist and I think Gil. I think they shot that the same day as they shot this Janet documentary stuff. Were they supposed to? Did you go against rules? Did you go? Did Justin? There's just so many questions, right, that have not been answered. So I'm like, I don't really care. And she's at the end of the day, she's like, leave Justin alone. We've moved on. So we move on to Jermaine. Now, I love this relationship, right? They're weird, but they're very cute together. Like, they're very odd. I think because he's very short. But they were so cute together. And he would do these, sort of like Renee. Renee documented 10 years of her life. Um, he kind of like documented moments in time of her life when they were together. It was so cute. It's online. It's on YouTube. She talked about how DeBarge asked her to marry her, asked to marry her. She didn't smile. She talked about how Renee asked to marry her. She didn't smile at all. She just like talked about this, like they were on the beach or something and it was raining. She talked about how Jermaine asked to marry her. That lady smiled. Okay. I think she really loved Jermaine. I think he really loved her too. I think they were a cute couple. I like most of the music they put out, they made. I'm kind of over, him and Mariah, that music was sort of like, I don't know. I'm not going to say anything. Never mind. I don't mean to say that. But I like the music that she made. That's when I really became like a real good, like knowledgeable, like aware of Janet Jackson fan. When 20YO came out, um, 20YO, Discipline. That's when I was like, oh, Janet Jackson. So I'm more of a 2000s era fan. Not era fan, but like that's when I, became a fan. Um, but he cheated on Janet, so there's that. Uh, she talked about her having a baby at 50, and they had, like they had these random people talking, Tiana and Sierra and Whoopi Goldberg. Don't ask me why Whoopi was there. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out. Whoopi Goldberg was like, how are you going to have a baby at 50? Well, you just do it. You might get around a little bit slower than the others, but you just do it. And I'm like, I don't know how that, I don't, it's weird. Congratulations, but it's weird. It's weird. It's weird. It's weird. I don't, okay. Yikes. I did see a thing about this documentary, and I do agree. They said they wish it was more about her music and not so much her stardom and her becoming this star. They wish it focused more on her music, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of wish it focused more on her music. I wish it focused more. It did a good job generally of the music, but I do wish we could have gotten a little bit more on it. Um, Overall, like I said, it was underwhelming. But one thing I do like about Janet, like I said, she is like sort of this blueprint from taking control of her career, becoming this woman. She's just evolution of a woman becoming this, and you literally see it. You literally see it. She's all in black, very serious. I want to, have fun, but yet have songs like Rhythm Nation and living in a world and make a moment. And it's like Janet was thinking about healing the world at 22, and what was I doing at 22? Like working at valet. Like I was not thinking about healing the world at 22. So congratulations to Janet about that. Rhythm Nation, Rhythm Nation, and then we go into the end of Rhythm Nation, Miss You Much, Come Back to Me, and then to this literally video switch where she starts, it's a little bit more color. It's a little bit, more sexier. The hair is a little different for Love Wouldn't Do Without You into the sexier Janet and the Janet album and the Rolling Stone cover and the If and um the sexualness and again and then just this sexual woman, and it's so beautiful. And then we have this woman of trying to heal herself and be socially conscious in a different way, like depression, talking about depression and sadness and mental health with the velvet rope. And then we have, her leaving this relationship with Renee into All For You and having so much fun and having this pop dance record in a different way Then the Velvet Rope for All For You. It's just, that is such a beautiful blueprint of how you make a pop star. Somebody relatable, lovable, great music. It's just, when people say she's the blueprint of music, that's what I'm taking away from. I don't know. They don't really explain. Jenna is the blueprint. Okay, what is the blueprint about? That's what I take away from the blueprint. That's all I have to say about the Janet Jackson documentary. I do wish it was more. She did play the a new song called "Love to Love" at the end, and I have to say I wanted more. I want the album Black Diamond, but these days you got to get what you can take. Or in this situation. So thank you for listening to the Dare Show podcast. I have so many other, reviews, music talk. Yeah, that's all I have for you tonight, today. Janet and her men.